Hi guys, welcome to Intermediate Music Theory level. And this is going to be lesson 1 of the intermediate level. And we're going to be talking about scales and specifically the major scale. So some of the concepts that we'll be covering here, like whole steps and half steps and accidentals, sharps or flats, are going to be covered in the basic lessons. So if you're unfamiliar with them, I suggest that you start with the beginner level. But let's get started. I will be reviewing these concepts along the way too, so you can give it a shot as we go along. Okay, so I am going to use our musictheory.net website, and we're going to go to lessons and scales and key signatures. Let's start with the major scale over here. So a scale is a selection or a group of notes within an octave. And let's talk a little bit more about what that means. I'm going to pull up the keyboard. So let's start by reviewing the octave first. The octave is the distance between two notes when we go all the way around the musical alphabet back to the same note. So for example, if we're in C, we would be doing C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C. So this distance is an octave. And if you were counting, there are 8 notes along the way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can do the same calculation for the octave from any note. So F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. So F to F, that's an octave, and an octave down, F to F. So the other way to think about the octave is an octave is made up of 12 half steps or semitones, which are called as well. And the way that we get that is, let's say we start from C, we count half step by half step. And remember, in the keyboard, the black keys give us a half step between white keys, but when the white keys are not separated by a black key, they're half steps themselves. So let's start and let's count 12 starting from C. C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 half step makes up an octave. And that's important to know because if we build scales, we're going to be using a combination of whole steps or half steps. And sometimes in more complex scales, we use other combinations as well. But going back to our lesson, we are going to start with the most well-known and basic scale of them all, which is the major scale. So the major scale is built by using this combination of whole steps and half steps. So W here represents a whole step and a half step. The H is half step. So these are going to be the distances between the first and second note. So the first and second note is going to be a whole step apart. This is going to be the distance between second and third note, whole step. This is going to be the distance between the third and fourth note, half step, and so on. Let's build some scales with this formula. Oh, and by the way, this formula works when you're going up the scale only. If you go down, you would have to go backwards. And maybe we'll try that in an exercise later so you can see what I mean. But just know for now that this formula works as you're going up in pitch, not down in pitch. Okay? So let's start with the C major scale. The C major scale is nice because it uses all the natural notes or all the white keys, and it works out really nicely. But we can build a major scale starting from any note, and we'll do a couple other examples later. So let's start with C, and you can see here we have middle C written on the staff, which is C4, and so the next note is going to have to be a whole step above C, which will be D natural. And you can see that on the keyboard because we had a black key in between, and that was going to be our half step in between them. So we've skipped the black key and we've gone to the next white key, and that's a whole step. And so from D now, our next note is going to have to be a whole step up from there. So we have E, and also, keep an eye on the keyboard on the right. You'll see that it's very easy to tell the distance between the notes if you look at the keyboard as well. Okay, next note is going to be a half step up from E. So we have F, and this is going to be F natural. So next one is going to be a whole step from F, which is going to be G. Next one is A, because it's a whole step up from G. The next note is going to need to be a whole step up. So we are in B natural. And finally, half step up from B natural is C. Okay, let's hear what the C major scale sounds like. Great. So the major scale, and all scales for that matter, they have a very specific sound. So the more you practice them, the more you're going to be able to hear the differences, and you'll be able to recognize them just by listening to them instead of having to follow this formula. So let's try E flat major. So here we're going to have to use accidentals, and specifically flats, to make this scale. So we're starting from E flat, which you'll see right here is selected on the keyboard. So the first interval that we need to cover, or the first distance between the notes, is going to be a whole step, as you can see. So a whole step from E flat is going to be F. And you see that we have to skip E natural along the way, because the distance between E flat and E natural would have been a half step. So if we had gone to E natural, we would have had a half step. So we have to go to F natural to make a whole step. So next, we're going to need a whole step from F natural. So that's going to be G natural. And you see we skipped over F sharp. We skipped over that black key. So next, we have a half step between G and the next note. So we are going to need to make A flat. And remember that we make a natural note. If we bring it down a half step, we're making it flat. We had to do that because if we had gone from G natural to A natural, we would have had a whole step. So we had to bring A down to A flat to make a half step. Okay, moving on. Next is a whole step from A flat, which is going to be B flat. We skipped over A natural. And finally, not finally, but the next note is going to be a whole step from B flat, which is C. We skipped B natural. Next is a whole step from C natural, which is D natural. We skipped over the C sharp or the D flat, whichever way you want to think about it. And finally, the last half step from D brings us to E flat. So we go back to the beginning where we started, E flat, an octave higher. Let's hear what E flat major sounds like. Great. So notice that this scale has 3 flats. And we're not going to count that last E flat because we already counted it at the beginning. So in scales, we only count the flats for different pitch notes. Once we get to the same pitch that we've previously had, we don't count that one. So we only have 3 flats in this scale. Let's build one final scale. Let's start with D major scale. So here, D, we will actually need to use sharps on this scale to make it work. So let's use the same process. So we start with a whole step from D. So we're going to have E natural. We have to skip over D sharp or E flat. The next note is we need to make a whole step from E natural. So we end up with F sharp. And the reason, as you can see, is because in the white keys, the distance between E and F natural is a half step. You see there is no black key in between. So in order to make that a whole step, we had to go to E, F natural, F sharp. So E, F sharp is a whole step. Next step is we need a half step from F sharp. So we are going to go to G natural. We don't need to skip anything. The next step is a whole step from G natural. That's going to be A natural. We skip over the G sharp. And the next step is a whole step from A natural, which brings us to B natural. We skip over A sharp. And the next whole step from B natural brings us to C sharp. And you can see that we had to do something similar from what we did between E natural and F natural. So in this case, B natural and C natural are already a half step apart because there's no black key in between them. So we had to go from B to C natural to C sharp. You see? So C sharp, that's a whole step. And last is going to be D natural. So you see we've gone around the musical alphabet: D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. We've gone around and we've gone full circle. Let's listen to D major. So if you pay attention and you actually listen to the scales back to back, you're going to notice that they have a very similar sound, even though they start in different notes. The relationship and the distance between the notes is always the same. So that's what gives it kind of like that unique characteristic, easy to recognize sound. The more you practice this, the more you'll be able to just be able to pick out a scale by ear without thinking about it. So D sharp, as you saw as we went through it, has two sharps. And any D major scale is going to have two sharps. So just remember this formula, or like this kind of like instructions how to build a major scale. You can use that to build any major scale starting on any note. We'll be practicing that in an exercise video shortly. Okay, I hope that you guys will be able to build major scales now from any note. I'll see you guys later. Bye.